Isn't it funny how many of us associate with a particular brand? I was in town the other day and bumped into this guy, yet to buy an e-mountain bike. And I said, well, what are you going to get? And he says, well, I don't know. So obviously bumping some ideas back and forth. And I said, what about a Trek? Kind of thinking that might suit him. And he goes, nah, I'm not really a Trek man. And I thought, well, what does that actually mean? And how do people actually arrive at such a mindset? Anyhow, we continued chatting, and so I said, well, you know, what bike do you ride right now? And he said, oh, Santa Cruz. And I thought, okay, cool, nice bikes, you know, name of a town in America, paint their bikes really nice colours, but in terms of componentry and parts, well, same as any other bike really. And suspension design, yeah, it's different, but then again, it's just different. And in terms of where it's made, well, the bikes are made where lots of other mountain bikes are made. So it just got me thinking, maybe there's more to it. Husqvarna, motorcycle brand, well yes, plus a ton of other things such as chainsaws, trimmers, and history. Founded in, yes, wait for it, 1689, made their first bicycle in the 19th century. Yes, and it is the 21st century today. Husqvarna actually started making motorcycles in 1903, but it was 18 years before they had their first engines. I'm wondering maybe one day we'll see this bike or sister brand Gas with their own motors. After countless motocross world championships, they started making eMTBs only a few years ago. As you can imagine, two-wheel manufacture is nothing new. Except the design of my new MC6, the silhouette is a little bit different. Okay, let's get a rundown of the MC6. Starting off with the frame, 150mm travel. I think 150mm is a great mix of having just enough travel to deal with the hits and also having not too much so that the ride is taken out of the equation by simply millimeters of travel. Because if you think about it, I think anything more than 150, 160, yes, it's good in brutal terrain. Yes, more travel will give you a little bit more squidge. But I think, you should choose the travel for the type of terrain that you ride. So if you're riding in lower, flatter grounds, then 180, 170 is too much, 150 is bang on. And having said that, Husqvarna do say this is the most comfortable and agile eMTB they've ever made. Now there's a reason that cross-country bikes have 100mm travel and downhill bikes have 200mm. Yes, but they don't have motors, you might well add. Yes, that's true, but if you're after engagement with the terrain and don't want geometry biased towards one or the other, then 150mm and associated geometry is perfect. Hey guys, don't get me wrong, I mean the sister brother bike of this, the Hard Cross with 170mm travel is a very cool bike, especially if you're hanging around in pretty savage terrain or maybe in the bike park. I'm guessing maybe my colleague Adam might be all over the Hard Cross bike, but it must actually be a very difficult decision for you guys when it comes to suspension travel. Do you just go for the longer travel just because it can do more things? But I don't know, for me, like I said, I think 150, it can do so many things, it's great. When it comes to the frame material of the bike, this is a carbon bike. Remember, only the MC4, 5 and 6 have this design. But you know what, end of the day, carbon or alloy, as long as it's good geometry, I'm not really bothered. I really, really like the design of this bike. I think it's quite unique in so many ways, you know, both the kind of the twin down tubes here, but the way they've left that motor breathe. I mean, why wouldn't you want to see the motor on an e-mountain bike? At the same time, after tilting the motor upwards in a 2 o'clock direction, it also means that Husqvarna have got room to move that battery, 720 watt hour battery in this bike, downwards. But I'll talk about the battery access a little bit later on. In terms of size, I've gone for a size large on this bike, 475mm reach. You can get also an extra large with a 500mm reach, and you know what? I could probably ride both bikes. I think that's the great thing about e-bikes. I don't think sizing is quite as critical as it is with mountain bikes. And interestingly, Matt behind the camera agrees with me, right, Matt? Yes. Now, the reason I say it's not as important, if you think about it, Let's talk about the geometry first. 65.5-degree head tube angle, 445 chainstay, 77 degrees seat tube angle on this bike. Now, there are some numbers which you cannot change. For example, the wheelbase. Now, if you went for, say, a size extra large, there's going to be a longer wheelbase on the bike, which you cannot change. However, you can change lots of other parts, such as the width of the bar, which will have a massive effect on how the bike feels, the height of the bar too. But not only that, but the stem length. There's a 50mm stem on this bike. If you went for an extra large, you can maybe knock that down to a 35. You could stick your seat forward a little bit. So in that respect, you would have maybe a little bit less room in the cockpit if you decided to do that, but you'd also at the same time have a slightly longer wheelbase, which would be great if you're riding maybe terrain which is more biased towards downhill. In terms of suspension, well, actually suspension components. Now there's a Fox Float factory fork on here, 36 e-bike specific with a Grip 2 damper. Do you know what? I actually prefer the black stanchion performance version of this fork, which you will actually get on some of the lower spec bikes. Cool thing about Fox Husqvarna, you've got a suspension setup guide. I mean, I don't actually use it, but ignore my advice in that respect. No, seriously, this bike has got a lot of adjusters in terms of compression and rebound. And as I mentioned, I prefer the performance fork. It's got less adjustment on it. And I think if you're not into fiddling with dials, it could be a better option. Right, components. Now, before we go into that, returning to the opening question about people's association with different brands. Husqvarna, is it the fact that, you know, I've got, you know, motocross background, I was into that for many years, or is it the fact that when I used to work in the forestry, I was a Husqvarna guy, not a still guy? But I mean, it seems ridiculous to say, yeah, I'm not a still guy, I'm a Husqvarna guy. It seems just ludicrous now, but nevertheless, Husqvarna is, well, I'm kind of attached to it in some way. Similarly, with shifting and certain components, I do like the positive shift of a good XTR shifter and cassette. Elsewhere on this bike, we've got XT brakes, 4-piston calipers. I think there's 180 rotors on here. You know what? I might change those up to 200s in the future, but 180 for now, this time of year is bang on. More importantly, the contact points. First of all, my bum, got my ergon seat in there, ergon grips in there, and of course, the mighty new Pirelli tires. I think it's quickly being recognized that these are exceptional e-bike tires simply because of the tread pattern, the fact that you can run them at lower pressures, and you might even notice I've actually switched to tubeless as well. Two other vital component parts to my MC6 are, first of all, the new Garmin Edge Solar 840, which can be connected direct to my Shimano motor and which I use for route planning and, more importantly, post-ride analysis of sector speeds, heart rate on some crazy tech climbs, and many other metrics. And also my favourite pedal, the Nukeproof Horizons, as used of course by that multiple World Cup down champion Sam Hill. One other point which I mentioned earlier, which I need to tell you guys about, is the port for the battery, which, as you can see, you can simply access that easily down here. So you haven't got to get any Allen keys, you simply pop that off, battery comes out, job done if you're in a hotel or you live in a house with no garage like myself. Boom. So yeah, on the subject of that battery, remember it's a 725 watt hour battery in that down tube, so some great range on there. And one thing we've not spoken about yet, of course, it's the motor, Shimano EP8. Got plenty of room to breathe, unlike on some other bikes. I really like the fact this bike has got the minimalist controller on there. I think that's all you need. Obviously, you've got the display on the handlebar, so you can have 2 custom presets on it. But you know what? I pretty much run this bike as stock, in the stock settings, on the more power, less range, rather than more range, less power kind of setting. One thing on the wheels we didn't talk about is we've got the DT Swiss 1700 hybrid wheels in there. They're aluminium, so that combined with a good volume tire on there is going to give me possibly a little bit more than maybe like 10 mil more in suspension travel. Okay folks, let's rewind it back to the start. What are your feelings? What are your motivations when it comes to buying an eMTB? Please let us know your thoughts on this subject. I think, obviously it's just my viewpoint, is that Husqvarna have done something pretty unique and distinctive with this bike in terms of the silhouette and the motor placement on it. In terms of power, plenty. In terms of battery, plenty. Geometry, more than enough for all kinds of riding, uphill, downhill, along and across. So I think a great all-rounder.